Crimson Bride, Chapter 2, Opportunity of Consequence. 50 years later, paranormal investigator Mick Dalton raised his weary head from the microfiche machine he had been looking through for the last hour. He took off his wire-rimmed glasses, ran his hands through his thick, light brown hair, then rubbed the bridge of his long, thin nose. He picked up the next microfilm, loaded it into the machine, and looked into it once again. His light, blue eyes blinked at the article he was reading. The article in question told him of an old, long-abandoned insane asylum, where both patients and doctors went missing. It read, June 12, 1959, article from the Daily Inquirer. The Harrow Hall Sanatorium was closed today due to a fire and the unexplained disappearance of several patients. The patients were all under round-the-clock care of doctors and nurses. When questioned by police officers, they claimed they had no idea how this happened. One nurse, Mrs. Sarah Smith, told the Daily Inquirer, "I can't believe what happened. I was giving Mrs. Lindsay her weekly bath. I helped her into the tub and turned around to get a bar of soap. When I turned back, she was gone. No scream, not even a ripple in the water. Just gone." Harrow police have investigated, but were unable to find any evidence of foul play. The search for an escaped patient, Margaret Williams, still continues after several months on the run. A reporter from this very newspaper investigated the location where all the disappearances took place, but found nothing. Yes, Mick thought. I found the location for the show. He must have said this out loud, because the stern librarian looked over at him and put a long, well-manicured finger to her lips and silently signalled him to be quiet. Mick stood up and packed his worn leather satchel, went to the librarian to ask for a copy of the article. He grabbed the copy and walked out of the library into the clear, moonlit night, muttering to himself about the archaic machines in the library in this one-horse town. It was late October in Harrow, Massachusetts. Mick Dalton had just stepped out of the Harrow Library, ambled along the sidewalk several blocks to his small apartment. He normally took his old car, a '76 Pontiac Sunbird, but he didn't have the cash to spend on filling the tank, and it was nearly running on fumes as it was. Besides, according to the old wives' tale, a good walk did the heart good, or some crap like that. While he was making his way down the street, he was startled by a tramp, one of the unnumbered homeless wretches that took to prowling the shadows and alleyways. This one came out before Mick from the shadow of a dumpster. "Hey man, you got change for a fellow human being that's fallen on hard times? I need to get my medicine to keep the demon away." Mick was close to becoming homeless himself, but still found the nerve to say, "Look buddy, I ain't got no money to spare, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to a crazy bum like you. I'd rather spend it on beer for myself, which I'm guessing is your medicine." And with that, he simply stormed past the guy who gave him this disturbing remark. You will never find the peace you want. Your demons will follow you to the grave, and she will deliver you to them." Something in Mick snapped. He was about to walk off and leave the tramp to his ramblings, but he turned around, reeled back his fist, and struck. He slammed a meaty fist into the old man's wart-infested, bulbous nose, knocking the codger out cold with one blow. Mick didn't mean it, and now he couldn't apologize. He just shoved his hands into the pockets of his overcoat, kept his head down, and slinked off into the night. It was around 10 p.m. when Mick got to the door of his apartment building. He hated this place. Nothing worked right. The wallpaper drooped, exposing old, festering black mold. It was a crap hole, he thought to himself. But it was all he could afford. as soon as he walked in the entrance hall, the all too familiar smell of stale smoke and desperation hit his senses hard. "Hey, Frank," Mick called out to the old receptionist. "Oh, it's you, Mick. I was hoping it was Mrs. Swanson from 13, said the old man with a disappointed look on his sunken, prunish face. "Nope, just me. Has any mail arrived for me yet?" asked Mick in an anticipating manner. "No. Who wants the services of a guy like you? You're a snake oil salesman, and everyone knows it." "There's no such things as ghosts, Mick," hissed the old man bitterly. "They are real. I thought I saw one here once," Mick replied. "Really? Who'd you see? And where?" "Wasn't in this building, I can tell you that. I've got enough guests complaining of rats, which are not here either." He stabbed the finger on the top of his ramshackle desk to prove his point. "It was you, actually. I mistook you for one when I first came here. But then, I don't even think the Reaper himself could be bothered to take your miserable old carcass," Mick jibbed. Frank just scrunched up his face. Mick had won this round. That old snake oil salesman wouldn't win the next. Mick then went straight upstairs to his apartment. He rummaged around his satchel and his pockets for his keys, shocked at the fact that he didn't seem to possess them. What the hell happened to them? Did that old hobo take them? Nah, that old codger didn't seem the type to dip pockets. When did he lose them? Where? Suddenly his memory flashed. Thankfully he remembered. He kept them under the welcome mat. His body was still in shape, but his mind was slowing, alarming for a man only in his 30s. Panic over, lost keys dismissed, Mick entered and switched the lights on. He was disgustingly reminded of how much of a dump he always seemed to leave it. The wallpaper was almost as dingy and dirty as the ones along the hallway. Clothes, empty takeout cartons, and discarded beer bottles decorated most of the apartment. Dominating his coffee table was a small mound of cigarette ash, which overflowed the ashtray that lay somewhere under all the butts. Mick sat back on his old, worn sofa, drinking a beer he had retrieved from his fridge, trying to finish off the previous night's burger and fries, while listening to the news on the radio. His apartment matched the mood of the time. He didn't have any leads at this point, except for the news article he had just read, and he only had $30 to his name. He needed money, he needed a lead, and soon. Then to his surprise, the phone rang. Mick got up off his sofa, turned off the radio, and grabbed his phone, which he had thrown on the coffee table when he walked into his apartment. He looked at the caller ID, but it was not a number he had recognized. He answered the call. "Hello? Who's this?" Mick asked. The voice on the other end was shaky and barely audible. "Hello?" the voice said desperately. "Is this Mick Dalton?" "Yes, this is Mick Dalton," he replied. "Oh, thank God I found you. I need your help." "My help? With what?" "Proving the Crimson Bride is real. Please, I'm begging you. I will pay you whatever you ask. Please, I'm desperate. I'm locked in and I can't get out of the house, and she's right here," the terrified woman whispered. A desperate woman is the best client. They almost always overpay. "Okay, where are you? I'll come right over. Have you called anyone else? Police or someone?" The panicked woman screeched. "No, I found your card and then called you right away." She gave Mick her address, and he once again set out into the night. He walked down the old streets he lived, and walked past streetwalkers and bums that littered the neighborhood. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized he had not had a chance to even take a shower before he left for his new client's place. He was in such an excitable state that he didn't even think to ask for the woman's name. It doesn't matter right now, he thought. I'll learn more when I get there. He was thinking of how much cash he could squeeze out of the woman, who, he thought. Had probably just seen some fool tomcat in a tree outside, and the light caught its eyes just right. Or wrong in this dame's view, making them glow. Or neighborhood punks trying to rattle her up, although he would never say this to her face. He needed to be kind and caring if he wanted her money. She needed to believe he had been able to both see and get rid of this spook. Mick was, after all, only even remotely nice to his paying clients. When Mick arrived at the address, what he saw made him feel even worse about his own apartment. This house was beautiful, with its perfectly kept front yard, large black iron gates, and white brick walls, but the house itself was dark. Mick thought in a sarcastic tone, "This is gonna be good." Mick walked around the meandering pathways up to the front door and knocked. No answer. He knocked again and waited. Still nothing. Mick had a bad feeling growing in the pit of his stomach, and decided to take a look around the back of the house. He walked around the side of a large colonial home, looking in windows as he went. All of a sudden, out the corner of his eye, he saw movement. He spun around on his heel to see what it was. Only silence and stillness greeted him. Mick shook his head. What was he thinking? No one would be around here this late at night, not even punk kids, trying to get a kick out of scaring the crap out of some woman. He took a breath to steady his nerves, then walked towards the flower garden. It was as well kept as the one around the front lawn, with neatly mowed grass and tidy hedges. He turned away from the garden back to the house. With the help of his cell phone light, Mick could now see clearly into the woman's window. The scene hit him like a lightning bolt. He saw her lying there motionless on the tiled kitchen floor, blood pouring from a vicious-looking wound on her head. Mick grabbed his phone, punched in the number for the emergency services. "Hello, 911. How can I direct your call?" The voice was of a youthful southern man, sounding reassuring and calm. "I need an ambulance. And police. I think somebody's been assaulted." "Okay, sir. Can you tell me your name?" "My name is Mick Dalton. Do you know this person?" "I was supposed to meet her for the first time today." "First, I need you to stay calm. This person, how are they wounded? Tell me what injuries you see." The 911 operator went through a list of conditions that Mick barely recalled answering, but his detective's brain took charge, and he answered every question that would at least give the paramedics a heads up on what they could expect, and that he could not get to the victim. "They're on their way, sir," the young man said. "Stay calm. They will be with you very shortly." Before either the cops or ambulance could arrive, Mick noticed something clenched within the dead woman's hand as he used the light on his phone to see inside the house. Mick found the windows all shut, and the door was closed and locked. He reached into the pocket of his faded jeans and took out a small pouch, opened it, and took out two thin silver objects. Mick put the lockpicks into the lock and moved them around until the door opened and he slipped carefully inside. He took a quick look around. Now he could see that the place was remarkably clean. No signs of a struggle in the whole kitchen. The body, on the other hand, was a bloody mess. Apart from the obvious head wound, there were deep lacerations all over the torso, as if she had been stabbed and slashed well over 20 times, in some sort of frenzy. Mick looked down at the dead woman's hand and saw what had previously snatched his attention. A piece of scrunched up paper. He took it swiftly and placed it into his coat pocket, and positioned the hand back where it was. He had told the 911 operator that he couldn't get into the house, If the cops found him inside, it would look bad. He had to leave the house, or rather the interior of it. He had to make sure his prints weren't there either. Did he leave footprints in the hall, near the body? He'd have to make it all sound plausible. After he left the house, Mick waited at the front porch. When the police arrived, Mick explained that he was a former military police of the army, turned PI. The P stood for both private and paranormal investigator, though Mick thought it best not to tell the officer that last bit of intel, out of the notion that the cop would think Mick was nuts. At the time, Mick had thought it was really punny. Over the years, Mick tried, many times, to explain his profession to people. Many would laugh or think him crazy, so he learned when the cops got involved, he needed to keep his mouth shut about the paranormal stuff. When Mick showed his PI license and inquired to the officer the identity of the dead woman, he told him that it was a retired nurse by the name of Sarah Smith. "So why were you at the victim's home, Mr. Dalton?" asked the officer in charge. Mick thought for a moment. He couldn't exactly tell him he got a call in the middle of the night to go to a perfect stranger's house that was rambling on about some crimson lady. So he said simply, "She was a client of mine." He hadn't lied to the officer exactly. After all, she had hired him and offered to pay him a lot of money. Crap, Mick thought. How am I supposed to get paid now? He snapped back to reality as the officer asked him another question. "Did you see anyone hanging around while you were here?" Mick suddenly remembered that shadow moving away from the house. Had it been the killer? Or was it just his overactive imagination? Either way, he told the officer what he saw.